welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Turn the Page. I am your host today, Jen, and I am joined by a guest who has been here before to talk about another book, another really fun book. And I am so excited to talk about this one. It was a great read and just so much fun. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yeah, hi Jen and everyone else who's listening. My name is Balazs Lorinczi and I'm the author of WOLFPITCH, the new graphic novel from Top Shelf that just came out 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, congratulations. I'm so excited that this is in the world already. It is so much fun. So as we were talking about before, you were on the show back in 2022 for Doughnuts and Doom, which was one of my favorite books of that year. It's just so sweet and so cool. And this one is too. So I would love if you could talk a little bit about where this project came from. Did you write this after Doughnuts and Doom, or were both in the works when you published that one?
So I wrote it during Doughnuts and Doom, but the way I do things is I write the story of the comic I'm currently working on. So in case of Doughnuts and Doom, I was around page 80 when I decided to just push through the whole plot, because I had the plot laid out, like how things going to play out, but didn't have the exact page by page scenario, like dialogues and what panel goes on what page, like how the pacing is, etc. So I've done that, and then after that was done, I basically just had around 50 more pages to just to draw them. So my brain was not occupied anymore with Doughnuts and Doom, which led me to start thinking, what am I going to do after Doughnuts and Doom? Because I didn't know what going to happen with Doughnuts and Doom then, because it didn't have a publisher yet. I only wanted to pitch it to publishers after it was finished completely to have a better chance. And so like, okay, I'm just going to do another book after that, surely. I don't want to stop. So I started thinking, what do I want to do? And that is basically my process for everything else. Same thing happened with WOLFPITCH. As soon as I hit the halfway point, I just decided to power through the plot, the dialogue and all that. And then when I was rendering the remaining 80 or how many pages, I was doing my third book, like writing the story for that, and now I'm doing the same, etc. The thought process behind WOLFPITCH was basically I felt like I have more to do with this base concept of it's kind of like an enemies to something, enemies to lovers, enemies to friends, but supernatural with music. Because I thought I didn't completely mine the idea. There's much more to say this. So and I felt like I didn't want to leave the world of it as well. Just wanted to spend more time there. So I just thought, what else could I do? So that was basically it.
Yeah, I really love thinking about magic and the supernatural and music, because to me, music is sort of a kind of magic. Like, it can change the way you feel, it can change the way that you view things, it can do a lot, I think, in our lives, and it brings people together. So yeah, could you talk about your own decision to write about music? Are you yourself a musician, and did you draw on your own experiences?
I wouldn't call myself a musician, but I do play music. I play the bass, and I used to be way back in when I lived in Hungary. I used to do music, but I would never call myself a musician as far as like someone who studied music professionally or anything like that. But I do have experience of quite a few gigs that I've did, stuff like that, like underground metal rock stuff. What was the first part of the question? I get distracted. What was the decision to just write about music, basically?
Yeah, and how you view the relationship between magic and
yeah. Well, obviously, the way you described it as like it can alter your thought process, and it can affect you as a person with music playing. That is very much true. I think a lot of people can relate to that. But also, just historically, there's a lot of connection between music and magic. Just if you're thinking about stuff like chanting and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure one of my books actually, I think in Doughnuts and Doom mentioned something about that as well. I don't like to put too much thought into like the mechanics of it, like how certain things play out, because that can hinder me as far as how writing my stories. I'm more trying to focus on what a certain like these supernatural elements mean to characters. So between Donuts and Doom and WOLFPITCH, even though they are both about music and magic to a certain degree, they are quite different as the way they work. Because Donuts and Doom, it's specifically music creates magic how you would imagine it in like a cartoon or a Marvel movie or something like that, like an actual like you see the things flying around and stuff like that. But in WOLFPITCH, it's more the nature of the characters are supernatural and they have a relationship to music because of that. The main character, who's a werewolf, who plays the bass, she is a really good musician because she's a werewolf. And there is another part that I don't want to spoil that gets revealed why it's important for her to be specifically a werewolf. And there's also a ghost who has a character arc that is defined by her not being alive while she was a musician and wants to still be a musician.
Yeah, I really love our main trio of characters, and I would love to talk a little bit more about them. So we have Izzy, who is the werewolf you referenced, Geraldine, our ghost, and then there is Delilah. And I really think they together, they have a really complex but lovely dynamic. And of course, different individuals have different dynamics too. So let's talk about Izzy first, because I really love her. She is confident to a degree that I envy, but it gives her problems sometimes. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about, as a writer, when you are creating characters, how do you balance a character's, if you want to call them maybe flaws or traits that create issues for them, with the traits that perhaps you root for more, or that, make you sort of want to be on their side, if that makes sense.
Yeah, how to make a character who's clearly flawed still likable, basically. I just hope for the best, because you need to have character flaws in order to have a conflict. And if you don't have a conflict, most of the time you don't have a story. Very few times when there is zero conflict in a story that's still good and worth reading or watching. So I think the first thing I usually come up with is like, what's the narrative arc? What is the main defining feature of a character? And in case of Izzy, it was her overconfidence and being overly competent to a degree that is alienating to other people, or like unbearable, not alienating, but she's just very annoying. But because I think, and this, I hope I don't sound like I'm praising myself, but I think she's likable because she's kind of cute. She's just a big, fluffy, very enthusiastic dog, basically. But that was my intention. And I think when I'm drawing her, I do drawing and writing at the same time, even though it's just rough sketches, but that really helps me to visualize things. And the visuals really guide me to how to write a story. Sometimes I solve my own writing problems by just starting to like draw out things, and then all of a sudden the solution appears. And that's true to a degree with like how the characterization work, because in my head certain dialogue scenes play out certain ways, but then I start drawing them and I realize, oh, that character would do this gesture, or just how other characters relate to it just based on how they appear visually. And I think with Izzy it really helps that I try to design her to be cute, not like a traditional werewolf, a scary one. She's more of a like an anime cat girl, a bit. Not the overly sexualized one, but cute, ears, tail, but more human-like. And then with the other characters, I have a real problem in real life dealing with personality flaws and just friction between personalities. I really hate that. I really hate beefing with people. And I feel like writing out characters who do have these beefs with the knowledge that I can resolve these differences on the page, it's almost like a power fantasy. So it's a really good question, because I never ever thought about this actually. I just hope that the way I write this out and my intention of pitting these characters against each other, what clearly the reason is that they are there, that they have to overcome these differences, that I hope this whole thing gonna make them likable to the reader. So I think that is the best answer I can come up right now.
Yeah.
Because I never thought about this before, but maybe I should.
That's a really good answer. And that resonated with me when you were talking about being somebody who is uncomfortable with friction and conflict and beefs in my real life. And that was always a struggle for me as a writer, because me as a person, I try to avoid conflict, but you need to lean into that as a writer.
Yes.
So you have to make your
You need to magnify that, like stuff that happens in real life that already kind of puts you in a mood. Like I still work part-time, and I work in retail, and you can imagine that there is quite a few just weird interactions. And when I go home, just one sentence that someone said to me during the day becomes my like shower thought of like, well, it's just ruining my day. And then I sit down and I have to take that and basically amplify it. But I could, like, I can use that as inspiration if I wanted to. But sometimes I do that, but only if I can like emotionally distance myself from it. So I'm not putting my traumas on the page. But the benefit of it is that this is my world. These are my characters, and I can do whatever I want with them. So I can put them in a very bad situation, a very bad personal conflict, with the knowledge that I have the power to resolve it. Hopefully, I'm good enough writer to resolve it. So,
Yeah, the relationships all feel very real and lived in, and they have history too, for the most part. Geraldine is like meeting everybody for the first time, but Izzy and Delilah have a past. Yeah, I would love to talk a little bit about your process too. You were talking before about how you like to start writing the next one as you reach a certain point in the work that you are currently drawing on. And is that part of how you sustain yourself through a long project? Because graphic novels, especially when you are writing and drawing, are intensely labor intensive and they take a long time often. And so is that part of how you keep it fresh for yourself? Like, how do you sustain yourself over the long term with a big project like that?
the reason I start writing a story because I just have an idea and I can't stop thinking about it. But obviously, it gets stale after a while if you just keep thinking about it over and over again, but not doing anything with it. There is a weird kind of two wolves inside me. One of them is basically like, I hate writing. This is really weird, but I hate that. So, like, I kind of want to think about the story. I want to, like, just kind of keep thinking, like, how situations would play out. But I have to write it down. Otherwise, there is no point to it. But then I just stare at an empty page and I'm like, no, this is the decision I have to make. I need to decide how to start. I need to decide exactly how this is going to be. And as soon as I put it on the page, well, obviously I can change it, but it feels like there's something almost set in stone at that point. You need to lay down a foundation that you can build on, and you want to lay down the first stone well. As again, one of those things I haven't really thought of because it's a long process. I try to do it in portions. So I tend to do like at first I do like the first 10, 20 pages because it's a really good way to have a feel to like how this story gonna kind of work. Because even though I do have my own style, I like to think I do have a style to myself. So all of my books, when my third one comes out and eventually the next and next, I think people would kind of see that, yeah, this is how I write a story. So none of them going to be very different from each other. But at the same time, because they're different characters and different narratives, you're going to play out different ways and different stories. You're going to start them differently. Like sometimes you have a more quiet start. Sometimes you have a more immediate rest start. So I like to do like a feel, like a 10, 20 pages, a first little chapter. That started with how, like, as Donuts and Doom, I thought of it as like a webcomic, like chapter by chapter by chapter. And then I do that for a while, 20, 15-page increments. And then after I'm halfway through the story, maybe, I kind of lose patience with that or freak out and think, okay, if I don't get this whole thing out, I might make a mistake somewhere. Like I'm on page 150, and then I realize, oh my goodness, I have to change the ending. But in order to do that, I have to go back and redraw 50 pages. I don't want to do that usually, but I would prefer not to do that. So after halfway through the plot, I kind of just like sit down and be like, okay, let's do the rest of the story in rough layout. So I know how it's going to flow. I know where everything is, where how the dialogue have to land and the plot beats have to hit their marks, etc. The current one I'm working on, which is my fourth full-length graphic novel, I try to do it as a daily exercise because, as I mentioned before, when I said hate writing, it's like my least favorite part of the process. If I get into it, it's fun, but every single day it's a struggle to get into it, because that is the most involved part of it, I think. But I'm just in my own head with my own thoughts, nothing to distract me. So I decided to, every day before I start rendering a page, I just write 2 or 3 or 4 pages at least. Is get the dialogue done, see how much dialogue fits on a page, or do a rough layout. And I'm doing this for like 2 months now, and now I'm at the very end of it. So I think today and tomorrow, and maybe the day after, I'm gonna be just focusing on that to finish it. Because the fun part starts after, when I just have to just draw, just don't have to think, just draw the lines and put in an audio book. And that's what keeps me really going for a long period of time, because that's just listening to podcasts and audiobooks and stuff, and maybe put on a TV show in the background. Just rewatch Derry Girls, for example. So that keeps me going. I think there was something else I want to mention, but I talked for too long, so...
No, that's great. And I really love that system. Like when you're writing, you are forging the path, right? But when you are drawing, you are just following the path that you forged. So that kind of makes a lot of sense why the rendering is a little bit less stressful, I think. Yeah.
You still make a lot of decisions while drawing, but it's decisions that you can make while you can, as I said, listen to an audio book. And I don't know how like actual like prose writers do it. Like, Stephen King, who writes so much that he's just in his own head. I like that to a certain degree. Maybe it's like because when I was younger, I did a lot of daydreaming, just like sitting around and just thinking about my own bootleg versions of superhero comics that I've read. I came up with my own little superhero universe when I was like 8 years old. Obviously, it was rubbish, but maybe because we had just way less media around us. It was the 90s. In Hungary, we had like for a long time, we had 2.5 TV channels, basically. So sometimes in the summer, there was not much to do other than daydream. But now I feel like there's so much else I want to do. Plus drawing, because I get a bit of anxiety as well. If I just sit and stare at the wall and trying to come up how to execute a story instead of actually drawing a page, I feel like I'm not actually doing the work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe that's just the residual bad memories from, or like bad experiences from like art school when I was studying animation or filmmaking, when we were talking about what we're gonna do, and then I not ended up doing like even a quarter of what we came up with. And it's just left a bad taste in my mouth. So now I'm more inclined to get on with it. So maybe that's why the writing process is my least favorite, because there's a lot of like not getting on with it, and instead of just sitting and thinking.
Yes. Yeah, it's harder to measure progress in writing and pre-writing, like all that thinking that you have to do before you get stuff down on the page. And it's not a very rewarding process for sure.
It's rewarding when you get it done, but a lot of times I managed to get into that problem with my third book and the current one as well. I had to kind of walk away from, like, I had a problem with how to finish up certain parts of the story, how to make them work the way I wanted them to work. And I ended up thinking maybe I should discard most of the base concept that I came up with, or like the base plot points that I had in mind. And I ended up for like a week and a half just doing drafts and discarding them, drawing out like 10, 15 pages in rough layouts, and then realizing, no, that still doesn't work. And then after done that 3 or 4 times, I ended up back at where I started from, which is very frustrating. But I realized I at least eliminated all other possibilities, which is good, because then you know that what you're doing is the right thing for this story. But then on a practical level, you spent a week and a half just generating nothing, basically.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in the creative process, I feel like, is doing it wrong a couple times in order to get that out of the way for doing it right.
Yeah. And especially in my case, when you realize the first thing that you start out with was the right thing all along,
Yes.
You just didn't have a very minor thing, just a very small thing that you had to put in there to make it work. But because you didn't have that, you thought the whole thing not going to work, and you had to restart all over again.
Oh,
But that just proves that the original idea is usually the original vibe that you get, like the inception, basically, is usually a correct thing, because there is a reason why you started out with that specific thing that you started out with.
Hmm.
I feel like I'm talking in very abstract terms right now, by the way. So hopefully the listener's not going to be like, what is he on about?
They're really getting into the weeds about process, but I love that, Well, I think this has been really great and fascinating. So thank you for joining us. So what is next for you? I know sometimes you can't talk too much about what's in the pipeline, but what is the third one that you referenced?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I have another fully finished graphic novel. It's called A Bite of Pepper, which is going to be published in end of next summer. I think it's slated for the end of August, which is not going to be about music. So it's a bit of a departure, but it's about supernatural things, sort of. It's about a skateboarding vampire. So there's going to be similar themes, ladies who might be in love with each other, and one of them is a vampire. Similarly, a slice of lifey. I don't even know if I like to call my story slice of life or like low stakes type affairs. I feel like this is even more slice of lifey, even a bit longer. Some different themes compared to the previous two. Not much to say yet because we didn't release anything. That's like a year away. Other than just there was an announcement that the book got McElderry publishing the book. So
Nice.
that's the next stop. And in the meantime, I'm working on my fourth book, as I mentioned, which is just planning to finish the actual plotting side of it in the next couple of days. But almost halfway through drawing it.
Oh, cool. Well, I am really looking forward to seeing both of those. So if next summer I am in touch again to talk about A Bite of Pepper, don't be surprised.
I would be very happy to do that. Hopefully, I'm going to have even more just weird thoughts about how to put together something. That was an even more arduous process to just crank that story out, but not in a bad way. Because when I looking back, that's the weird thing. Before we finish, just I remember what I meant to mention basically about how to keep myself fresh, like the process fresh. I realized that now I'm on my fourth book that I'm in a continuous cycle, like working on a book, getting a vibe for the next one. Can't wait to work on the next one because it's just a vibe yet. So it feels like so many possibilities and thinking, oh, it's going to be so much better than the one that I'm working on right now. So can't wait to start it. Start working on that book, start to bump into problems as you do, because there are always problems. That's the creative process. Thinking, oh man, that was so nice working on the previous book because that's already done. And then you start getting the vibes for the next one again, thinking, the next one is going to be, and it's a cycle. It just keep repeating itself. But it's a fun cycle.
Yeah, that is a fun cycle. And it's fun to be working on something all the time. And it's been very productive for you. You have books, nearly every year. It's really great.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't plan to stop anytime soon. So hopefully I won't burn myself out, but it's not something that I could stop if I wanted to, if I needed a break, but I don't want to. I kind of guilt myself into not wanting to. Sometimes I very rarely, but take one day off and I just sit on the couch and watch movies. By the end of the day, I can't wait to get back to it the next day. So hopefully this will continue. I don't know, until I'm 95, if I live that long.
That's great. I'll be in touch in, a few decades to make sure that we're
Yeah, just every time I manage to put something out, if you want to talk about it, I'm more than happy to. And if people want to listen to it, that's even, or people want to read it, that would be the best.
even
Even
better.
if they don't want to listen to me, as long as I can make something that people want to read, that's the best thing.
All right. Well, that means it is now the listener's job to go pick up WOLFPITCH. I think you're going to love this graphic novel. It is so cute, so cozy, and really just a beautiful story. Thank you again for joining us. This has been really lovely.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, listeners. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.